Wrestle Machine found more wrestling data for your consumption. Extreme Championship Wrestling is on the rise. February 13, 1995 Observer Newsletter, WCW Disney tapings details, Gene Okerlund Sleaze Award winner, big WWE house show crowd, a look at ECW Wrestling Observer Newsletter P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228 February 13, 1995. World Championship Wrestling returned to Disney MGM Studios in Orlando with 3 months' worth of television tapings for the worldwide show, through mid-May, from February 2 to February 5. Originally WCW would give away entire storylines for months in advance at these tapings, but now things are done a little more carefully with most of the angles taped at a later date and inserted into the program. In addition, at the last few tapings interviews were done specifically talking about matches or angles that, as it turned out, never materialized either because they weren't supposed to or because, more likely as is the case with this group, ideas were later changed. But among the highlights of the 4 days were: 1-star Hulk Hogan doing an interview for late February airing talking about having beaten Vader at Super Brawl. "I'll bet it won't be via pinfall unless Vader gets a hefty chunk of coin." 1-star The Butcher, Ed Brutus Beefcake Leslie, was turned back babyface and will feud with Kevin Sullivan and use the ring name, The Man with No Name. This was handled clumsily to the live viewers at Disney. On February 4, in a match against Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot, Butcher accidentally caused Sullivan to get pinned, and after the match during an interview, Sullivan piledrove Butcher. Later that day they taped a grudge match where the Man with No Name defeated Sullivan via DQ when he had the sleeper hold on and Avalanche interfered to save Sullivan. However, the next day, in a match taped for cable airing to start the feud that will air before the 2 matches taped the previous day, with Avalanche and Butcher against Hogan and Randy Savage, he was back as Butcher and as a heel, and in that match after the heels lose, they began teasing a split-up of the Faces of Fear. There was a decent amount of internal opposition to making such a quick turn back, which was largely done so when Hogan hangs out with Leslie outside the ring as they do and are frequently spotted doing so now with wrestling fans. It won't seem like a kayfabe violation. The Man with No Name gimmick is believed to have been suggested by Kevin Sullivan, since he is probably one of the few people who had heard the idea from Paul Heyman about 1 year ago when Heyman had come up with using that name first for Bill DeMott, and when that fell through, for the character that instead was named 911. 1-star The only matches made clear via interviews for the March 19 WCW Uncensored pay-per-view show from Tupelo, Mississippi was a main event, which is either a tag match with Hogan and Savage vs. Avalanche and Vader, or more likely a singles double feature with Hogan vs. Vader, probably in a strap match, and Savage vs. Avalanche. 1-star matches made clear either via interviews or backstage gossip for the following pay-per-view, Slamboree, which will be May 15 at the Bayfront Center in St. Petersburg, Florida, where Hogan and Savage vs. Vader and Ric Flair, Sting vs. Big Bubba Rogers and Kevin Sullivan vs. Man with No Name. 1-star Frank Anderson, fresh off a conviction in Sweden for purchasing physique-enhancing HGH, was rewarded by getting wins in about 12 squash matches, although it is believed all will only air on syndicated shows in Europe and he won't be pushed within the United States. Speaking of that story, Anderson was convicted on January 23. The Swedish court case claimed Anderson intended to use the 35 capsules of the drug Genotropin he purchased for $1,500 but didn't claim whether or not he actually had used the drug before the bust. The court claimed Anderson and a second unnamed individual had purchased HGH from a Swedish mother whose daughter received the drug via prescription because she was unusually small. HGH in clinical use is used to treat children who are extremely small, but instead of giving the drugs to her daughter as prescribed, sold them to bodybuilding types looking to put on weight and muscle. Anderson, who denied the charge, was fined and given a 2-year suspended sentence and, according to the Wire Service story, intends to appeal the case. 1-star also debuting as a heel is Sergeant Pittman, Craig Pittman, the former Marine Corps wrestling champion that Eric Bischoff a few months back attempted to get put into UFC for, but the UFC promoters instead chose Dan Severn as their wrestling representative. He looked good for a rookie. 1-star Meng worked in squash matches and worked an angle with Jim Duggan. After interfering to save the TV title in a Duggan challenge to Arnold Anderson, Duggan hit Meng over the head with the 2x4 but Meng just stood there and didn't sell the blow. 1-star Steve Austin, who was released just days earlier after knee surgery in January, returned as a heel, but immediately got hurt again. On February 3 in a match against Bagwell, Austin needed 12 stitches in his eye after a mistake in the ring. While he didn't wrestle the remainder of the week, he's expected back in the ring shortly, although nobody seems to think with much of a push. One star among the wrestlers who worked as jobbers were Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton back as the Fantastics, although they were also given at least one television win, putting over every heel tag team combination in the promotion, and Tim Horner, who reformed his mid-80s tag team with Brad Armstrong, putting over the new tag team called the Blue Bloods. One star. The Blue Bloods consist of Steve Regal and Bobby Eaton doing a comedy routine with Eaton renamed Earl Robert, although they don't try to insult the audience and pretend he's not the former Bobby Eaton. Eaton got the spot originally slated for the departed Gene Paul Levesque, and the duo was put over strong all week, which means they'll probably be feuding over the tag team title within a few months. Harlem Heat didn't work squash matches the final few weeks of tapings, which leads me to believe they're going face. I don't know where that leaves Sherry, although putting her with Austin would make sense, as was the original plan, and didn't want to give it away by having to tell fans to cheer them in squash matches. One star. The only other wrestler to debut was a heel called Victor Kruger, said to be from Europe, who may also only be for European consumption. One star. Brian Pillman worked as a babyface, although those segments on television, designed to get him over to women as a heartthrob type, may have the reverse effect a la Alex Wright, which would be just as well because he's better suited to the heel role. They've already dropped the California Brian name and gone back to Flying Brian. One star. Despite the rumors everywhere that Ric Flair's return will be as Vader's manager, in the only match Vader worked at the taping, on February 5th, he came out sans manager. Word we get is that the decision on if, or and when Flair starts in Vader's corner will probably be made in the next few days. One star. Rick and Scott Steiner were listed on the booking sheet as debuting at the February 5th show in a match against Pretty Wonderful, but did not appear. Because they were booked in Japan on February 3rd and February 4th, that would have been the only date they could have appeared. One star. The atmosphere at the tapings was said to be different from the previous ones. The previous tapings were not pushed on a local wrestling television show and attracted a non-wrestling crowd of mainly amusement park attendees who were given cues to cheer and boo by a cheerleader off camera. This taping was pushed to wrestling fans, and the crowd was predominantly wrestling fans and not non-fans. The cheerleader did tell the fans who to cheer and boo before the matches, but didn't lead cheers as the matches were going on, so the crowd reactions should come across more natural. One star. It appears they are building up a TV title feud with Arnold Anderson vs Alex Wright, as they did the typical time limit draw and outside interference title saving DQs in matches that were taped between the two of them. Ironically, what has gotten by far the most comment in the past few days from WCW has nothing to do with Disney, but in setting perhaps a new standard for 900-line sleaze over the weekend. Gene Okerlund during the Saturday television show announced the death of a 45-year-old former heavyweight champion and to call the hotline to find out who it was. The reason the age was used was to tease fans into thinking it was Ric Flair, who is 45, although most fans probably don't know Flair's age. The idea is that most would probably guess his age at about that. Of course it was Jerry Blackwell, who had died 2 weeks earlier, that was talked about. Reportedly the hotline did an all-time record, to the point the company now believes there is more interest in Flair than originally believed, which is besides the point. Many wrestling companies have ignored acknowledging deaths of some of the biggest names in the industry, from Buddy Rogers to Bruiser Brody to Kerry Von Erich, Adrian Adonis, Art Barr, and the list is endless, which they are often criticized for. Can you imagine if stars of similar notoriety within their world in football, basketball, baseball, etc. were to pass away and the networks and local broadcasters were given a directive going in not to make mention of the deaths? But to try and use the death of a wrestler as a money-making venture puts the company in the moral category of a Jack Fritz Von Erich Adkisson, who, fittingly, will be inducted into their Hall of Fame at Slamboree. To use a real death, particularly of someone whose family lives in Atlanta, as a tease to make money and to find out if Flair, the wrestler who largely carried this and its predecessor company for much of the past 15 years, is still alive, takes things 5 steps lower. The WWF drew its largest crowd of the new year and biggest house show crowd since October on February 3rd at the Montreal Forum, when a reported 12,113 fans showed up for a 10-match loaded-up show since there was no B-show that night. It was the first show promoted for Titan by Raymond Rougeau. Montreal has been the WWF's best house show city for the past year, largely built around Raymond's younger brother Jacques as the top draw, including a retirement match that sold out the Forum with 16,800 fans and drew $267,000 Canadian, about $214,000 American. Because Jacques' efforts as a self-promoter in Montreal resulted in big crowds every time out since Jacques returned to Titan as part of the Quebecers tag team, he was made local promoter after his retirement match in October. However, Jacques and Vince McMahon had a falling out largely over McMahon not wanting to do a 60,000-seat stadium show that would have taken place this past week, feeling that Titan wasn't ready for an undertaking that big. Roju, who made promises around town about charity donations from the show which he claimed McMahon had first agreed to do, had a falling out which resulted in a lot of local newspaper coverage. Eventually it turned into a Family Feud-type atmosphere as Raymond, who does the French language announcing on the Titan local television show along with interview segments on Wrestling Challenge, defended McMahon and called his younger brother immature in newspaper interviews. Jacques first tried to contact WCW about doing a stadium show with himself as the headliner, which didn't endear him to many in the city since he had just hyped a major retirement match weeks earlier saying this was a real retirement, was turned down. Then after being informed that his WWF contract didn't expire until June, has told friends that once it expires, he'll begin promoting indie shows around Quebec in the summer. While the show had a strong advance, it didn't indicate a crowd this large. A lot of the credit for the crowd seems to stem indirectly from The Undertaker's knee injury, which will keep him out of action the next few weeks. Pierre-Carl Aouillete, who has been on hiatus from WWF until they reintroduce him in a pirate gimmick, Jacques' opponent in the Sellout House in October who turned babyface for Montreal only when the two hugged after the match, was pressed into emergency duty replacing Undertaker for a match with Shawn Michaels. Ironically, even though Aouillete is a local French-Canadian, he only received about 60% cheers when he came out while Michaels received a thunderous response even though a heel. Michaels got the pin with his feet on the ropes and continued to work over Aouillete after the match, the apparent reasoning of killing off an apparent local draw being just in case Aouillete were to go with ex-partner Jacques and he as local top star, especially since Titan's plans are for Aouillete to return with his new character as a heel and drop all ties to being from Montreal in his gimmick which is really his main attribute for being a local draw. After the match, Rick Martel, who will apparently be used locally in the future in that babyface Quebecer role, tore off his suit and jacket and made the save. The most talked about smaller promotion in the world is without a doubt the Philadelphia-based Extreme Championship Wrestling. The ironies are many. ECW is a group that has never drawn much more than 1,000 to any show in its history. Yet it was one of two American promotions to be invited to the multi-promotion Tokyo Dome show. It finished third for Best Promotion and won Best Television Show in the Observer balloting. Among its relatively small core of fans are people who regularly drive hundreds of miles to the converted bingo hall for its major show each month. The irony doesn't end there. Promoters involved with much larger organizations such as Eric Bischoff this past weekend with WCW, when plugging the pay-per-view in Baltimore on Worldwide noted that they're running the Baltimore Arena and not a bingo hall, and Ron Skoler are clearly bothered with the attention ECW receives. ECW is talked of as being the best wrestling in the United States and among groups that regularly run house show it probably delivers the best house show product. An asterisk has to be put by that statement when comparisons are made with other groups, because judging from the physical punishment many of the guys take, they couldn't possibly work at that level if they were doing 4 or 5 shows a week and survive very long. Despite not having 6-figure contracts, it has 2 of the 4 most exciting performers that work regularly in the United States as regulars on top in Sabu and Chris Benoit. It has, if not the best television show, certainly the most creative and inventive show. The episode that aired on January 31st was among the best one-hour US TV shows I've ever seen. Its followers, remarkably similar in some ways and in other ways completely different to the mid-80s WWF fans and FMW Karaku and Hall fans, some of whom will defend it to no end, ignore its shortcomings, overstate its strengths and go crazy at even the hint any other wrestling or wrestlers could be better. Most fans, however, simply appear to be appreciative that they can see matches in their area where they know going in that everyone will work extremely hard, that shortcuts will be minimized or non-existent, that even though run-ins and outside interference will occur, that they will see a winner and a loser in just about every match and that something unpredictable is almost guaranteed to take place at almost any time on the show. There is probably more of what can best be called team unity, not just among the wrestlers but among the fans and the wrestlers combined, of any promotion I've ever seen in the United States. Every match on the show isn't always good, but every match does at least have something and nothing on the show comes off as something being done to kill or waste time. Fans from approximately 20 states and 4 countries were among the 790, paid was probably slightly more because some who bought advance tickets, particularly from out of town, may not have wanted to challenge the weather conditions, or so fans, a figure held down by a severe snowstorm which caused WWF to cancel all its American house show dates over the weekend, at the ECW Arena on February 4 for Booker Paul Heyman's latest concoction. Realistically, the group can best be compared with the EVA in Japan, both in quality and in style, although the booking is far more creative. The February 4th show reminded me a lot of a show I saw of EVA some 10 weeks earlier at Korakuen Hall. A lot of hard work from guys who are fairly inexperienced. A very over tag team on top and an excellent gimmick match main event. One excellently wrestled match in mid-card. A lot of blood, stiff chair shots and suicidal performances in between, and even a former big name who is somewhat out of place being used because they were once stars in that city. Headhunters are Public Enemy from a rule standpoint. Dick Slater is Tully Blanchard. Chris Benoit vs Al Snow is like Silver King and El Texano vs Super Astro and Takashi Okano. Cactus Jack is Cactus Jack. Terry Funk is Sabu. Ian Rotten is Shoji Nakamaki, although Rotten hasn't been body slammed on broken glass or taken bumps on a bed of nails 2000 thumbtacks yet. But then again, he hasn't been asked either. 1. The Pitbulls and Jason the Terrible, Roberto Rodriguez of the old and new one-starring group in Japan, defeated Hack Myers and the Young Dragons, Donnie Allen and in 11:20. It was mainly a squash when the Dragons were in, with Myers being given some offense and getting disgusted when the Dragons couldn't hold up their end. The most humorous part of the match was when one of the Dragons, the one who wasn't Donnie Allen, had his mask and wig come off. This didn't look like a planned spot because nobody seemed to know how to react when this happened, and he worked the rest of the match without it. Jason the Terrible, as opposed to Jason the Manager, was impressive. Myers juiced from Jason's hockey goalkeeper mask headbutts. After the Dragons were destroyed, it was 3-on-1 on Hack, who was pinned when the Pitbulls dropped Jay the Terrible on him. After the match, Hack beat up both Young Dragons and chased the Pitbulls off with a chair. He then cornered and attacked Jason the Manager. Then Valet Angel the Virgin Princess wearing a white wedding dress came out and slapped Myers a few times. Myers punched her twice and started spanking her, but she liked getting spanked and got up and started kissing Myers until Myers finally kicked her in the stomach and gave her a pile driver, and she did a stretcher job. And this was just the opener. 2 stars. 2. Tommy Dreamer pinned Steve Richards in 7:38. Dreamer was playing to the out-of-towners, largely an internet group, wearing one of their t-shirts. At one point Richards got it off him and started wearing it, taunting the group. Dreamer was really over to one section of the audience, but even after the push, he's still not that popular with the rest of the audience, although it's improved a great deal from last summer when he was booed out of the building every time out. After several near falls, Raven, Scotty Flamingo/Johnny Polo, interfered and held Dreamer while Richards used a superkick. This was all right in front of the ref and far too blatant even for a group trying to get over that they don't do cheap DQ endings except in rare circumstances. Dreamer won with a cradle. After the match, Dreamer nearly got into it with Raven, and as they dragged Raven off and Dreamer challenged him to come back, he told Johnny Polo to give a message to his friends at the WWF to kiss his ass. 1 1/2 star. 3. Mikey Whipwreck pinned Paul Loria in 9:17. Loria, about 5'4", is billed as the Giant. These guys are actually high school best friends. The match was really choreographed, like watching really green Mexican wrestlers who try a million cool spots and pull some of them off. They worked like crazy, but the timing was off in a lot of spots. At one point Whipwreck missed a plancha and crashed onto the floor, planned spot. At another point, Loria delivered something akin to an elbow drop using a chair to the throat, but Whipwreck's chin got in the way and was busted open and needed 6 stitches after the match, and blood was all over his mouth. At another point Jason the Manager suplexed Whipwreck face first onto the table. Both wrestlers were standing on the top rope when Whipwreck bulldogged Loria into the ring. Jason broke up the pin and Whipwreck punched Jason. Inside the ring, they did the backbridge into a backslide spot with Whipwreck scoring the pin. This wasn't as good as their match on the previous show. 1 1/4 stars. 4. Ian Rotten pinned Axel Rotten in 6:41. Total bloodbath brawl. Axel had the entire match working as the babyface using a street sign, brutal chair shots, the spots where fans hold up chairs and Ian gets thrown into them. Fans were handing Axel different foreign objects, most notably flying pans, and he really popped Ian with them. Ian juiced like crazy. Like Yukihiro Kanemura City. Once he got done with what was left of his forehead, he started juicing his shoulder. Out of nowhere, Ian double-legged Axel, put his feet on the middle ropes for leverage and got the pin. 3 1/4 stars. 5. Chris Benoit pinned Al Snow in 14:36. Both guys were heavily cheered coming out, which says something for the crowd since Snow had only worked in the building once before. For pure wrestling, nothing on the show came close. Benoit's execution is flawless, his work is so stiff you can't ignore it, and his intensity such that nobody can miss that he's in the top 2 or 3 in the world, and Snow hung with him. One great spot after another with Benoit working as a heel, although the crowd heavily cheered both men. Hottest spot was Snow doing a springboard from the apron into a dropkick to Benoit, who had his back turned. Snow also did a German suplex starting while instead of being behind Benoit, with Benoit and his stomach on the ground. After all kinds of great suplexes, Benoit used the Dragon Suplex, full Nelson German suplex, for the pin. They are doing a crippler gimmick with Benoit, who is going to get an enormous push, so Snow, who is leaving for SMW, did a stretcher job. 4 stars. 6. Shane Douglas retained the ECW title, pinning Tully Blanchard in 10-11. Douglas kicked out of Blanchard's slingshot suplex in the first minute. The fans didn't seem to have forgiven Blanchard for his performance on the previous show. Match was mainly brawling with some strong spots, but the crowd wasn't into it very well. Blanchard tried to suplex Douglas into the ring. Douglas held onto the ropes and fell onto Blanchard for the pin. After the match, Douglas held up 3 fingers. They are trying to make Douglas, Benoit and Dean Malenko into a 3-horseman type group, and Blanchard came back and acting like he was going to shake hands, then threw Douglas over the top rope, which apparently was a concession in order to get him to do the clean job finish. Douglas appeared to come out of the match with a bruised up thigh after doing a Cactus Jack double over the top rope clothesline spot. 2 stars. 7. Cactus Jack beat Sandman in an old-style Texas death match in 1609. Both Jack and Sandman came into the match with neck injuries suffered the previous night. Jack's was in Tokyo. He flew in about 19 hours straight to make it for the show. Jack had said in his interview the previous week that he'd retire if he lost this match. Jack used 3 brutal chair shots, one of which gave Sandman a severe concussion. He was hospitalized through the following Monday morning after throwing up backstage and in the hospital that night with a combination of concussion and compressed neck. In the first minute of the match, Sandman kept working, but it was a blur. Jack continued to pound on him with the frying pans, chairs and whatever other object fans gave him. Apparently Jack realized Sandman was out and kept pinning him so Sandman would stay down and lose. But Sandman was so far gone that he kept getting up because his memory was gone and he'd forgotten the deathmatch concept. They worked hard and all the blows were brutal, so in that way it was still a good match, but from a psychology standpoint it was awful since Jack simply kept winning fall after fall with a double-arm DDT and Sandman kept getting up after the 3 count, so the match would keep going, even when Jack did the elbow drop off the apron with a chair. Finally Sandman didn't get up for the 9th fall and the match was over. 3 stars. Before the main event, Loria came out and said he was the true giant of pro wrestling in what appeared to be kind of a spoof on the old WWF days when tall heels like John Studd or Blackjack Mulligan would say that for matches against Andre the Giant. He then began insulting 911, the other giant, who came out and did 3 chokeslams on him. Because Loria is so small, 911 would get him up high and lock his elbow and walk around holding him with one hand overhead before planting him down. So I guess 911 finally got to chokeslam a midget. 8. Sabu and Tasmaniac won the ECW tag titles from Public Enemy in 9:46 in a match where both team members had to be put through tables before the match could end. Another wild match mainly with brawling and chair shots, although Sabu opened with a tope. At one point Johnny Grunge was on the table and Sabu put a chair on the top rope and came off, but Grunge moved and Sabu went through the table. At another point Tasmaniac suplexed Sabu onto rock. It wound up with the table being set up and Tasmaniac and Grunge brawling on the ropes and both falling backwards through a table, so both were eliminated. Grunge threw powder in Taz's eyes and Sabu was double-teamed and Rock went off the top rope with a drive-by, senton in Mexican lingo, backward splash, onto Sabu, who went through the table, but the ref's back was turned so he couldn't call the finish. Sabu came back amidst chaos with Paul E. Dangerously and 911 involved and came off the top rope with a leg drop onto Rock on a table on the floor for the win. After the match the brawl continued with Sabu setting up a table in the corner and coing Rock and putting him on the table. Sabu got another table and put it on the top rope and was set to come off. Before he left, Benoit did a run-in and Sabu wound up both on the table, pretty much almost doing a dance just to maintain their balance. Benoit, who must have incredible strength and balance to have pulled this off, while standing on the shaky table on the top rope, kicked Sabu, picked him up for a power bomb and then leapt off, sending Sabu and himself both onto Rock and through the table for an amazing spot. Rock ended up being carried out and Sabu was left laying. They are doing an injury angle with Rock so he won't wrestle on the next house show and may have him on television in a wheelchair. The February 25 ECW Arena main event will be Sabu and Tasmaniac defending against Benoit and Malenko on February 25 with eventual plans to build toward a triangular match with all three teams in March. 4¼ stars. WWF wasn't the only group canceling its weekend schedule. In one of those supposed-to-bes that didn't happen, the erstwhile NWA World Heavyweight title was scheduled to change hands on February 4 in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, and the new champion was scheduled to be Dan Severn on a show cancelled because of bad weather. With Chris Condito, who holds the title which is recognized but never defended in his home SMW territory, leaving for Titan starting the 1st of March and thus unavailable, they had set up the title match and change for this past weekend and for whatever reason, never even advertised Severn as his opponent. The idea of going with Severn as champion appears to be because by bringing the belt into the octagon at the next UFC, that it'll give the title tremendous exposure since UFC pay-per-view shows draw so well, and perhaps it'll afford some local promotional opportunities if he does well again at the show. Theoretically, the next UFC pay-per-view show, if growth continues as it has, may trail only the biggest WWF shows when it comes to pay-per-view audience in 1995. In addition, based on his performance at the last show, Severn had to be considered something of a favorite to win the tournament and eventually get another match with Royce Gracie where, based on the previous match, he has to be considered as having at least some chance of winning. However, even though Severn made something of a name for himself among Japanese wrestling fans and among the UFC audience, of which maybe 1/3 crosses over into having any pro wrestling interest, aside from that group, he has no name value when it comes to American pro wrestling fans. At the indie shows he's done since UFC, his recognition has been way up, but the idea that he would draw UFC fans to independent pro wrestling shows hasn't turned out to be the case. Anyway, where this all goes from here is anyone's guess. I suspect things will go as planned, although when this will all happen hasn't been finalized. Results: January 19 San Juan Pantitlan, EMLL, Jocelyn and Princesa Dorada B Principesa and Guerrera Purpura, Migala and Lady Connors B Flor Metallica and Jalissa, Lady Apache and Pantera Serena B Fugitiva and La Diabolica, El Brazo and Cranio B Humberto Garza and Aguila Solitaria, El Satanico and MS1 Senior B Atlantis and Americo Rocca DQ. January 20 Netzawal Coyote, Uwa, 250, Los Migras 1 and 2 B Bat Blue and Goku, Los Moicanos 1 and 2 and Leopardo Negro B Arquero and Gran Kender, Gran Sueda, Robin Hood and Takeda and Tigra Volador B Super Crazy and Enemigo Publico and Loco Valentino, Aeroflash and Nuevo Audaz and Condor Man B Taraco and Redador and Exotico Adrian, Kanek and Gran Hamada and Principe Maya B Mr. Jack and Rocky Santana and Samurai DQ. January 20 Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, 700, Legendario and Ultimatum B America and Fierro, Selena and Lady Apache and Pantera Serena B Reina Jubuki, Akira Hokuto, and La Diabolica and Lady Star, Kato Kung Lee Sr. and Shocker and Cyclone Ramirez B Guerrero Maya and Guerrero del Futuro and Damian El Guerrero, Dandy and Negro Casas and Mascara Magica B Bestia Salvaje and Mano Negra and Archangel de la Muerte, El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Emilio Charles Jr. B Dos Caras and Ultimo Dragon and Hector Garza. January 20 Aztahuacan, EMLL, Orito and Mascara de Magica B Pequeno Pierre Auth and Pequeno Jacques Mate, Rock'em Cerebro B Shinobi and Fantastic, Silver King and Chamaco Guerrero B Pirata Morgan and Zando Kana DQ, Distrito Federal Welterweight Title, Atlantico B Corazon Salvaje. January 22 Treasure Island, Minnesota, American Wrestling Alliance, 375/all freebies, Jerry Lynn DJ B Trask, Evil Clown B Randy Gusto, Candy Divine B Peggy Lee Leather, American Wrestling Alliance Title, Larry Zabishko B Wahoo McDaniel. January 26 Baltimore, WWF, 2500, Henry Godwin B Bob Holly, Aldo Montoya B Quang, King Kong Bundy B Davey Boy Smith, WWF Title, Diesel B Jeff Jarrett, Bret Hart B Owen Hart, WWF Tag Title, Smoking Guns B Well Done, Razor Ramon B Bob Backlund. January 26 Indianapolis, Circle City Wrestling, 133, Flash Flanagan B Gary Hart, Barroom Brawler B Gordy Jones, Mike Samples B Bone Crusher Lewis, Phantoms B Ricky Morton and Tracy Smothers. January 28 Guanajuato, AAA, 3500, Bali and Sugar and Tornado B Pimpinela Escarlata and Shredder and Aladdin, non-title, Tony Arce and Volcano and Rocco Valente B Los Payasos, Mariachi and El Mexicano and Charo de Jalisco B. Dracula and Cars La Momia and Espectro, Angel Blanco Jr. and Eddie Guerrero and Fishman B. Pero Aguayo and Octagon and Tinieblas Jr. January 28 Dallas, NWA, 200, Nick Golden B. Devin Michaels, Chaz Taylor B. Sean Summers, Scott Putski B. Mike Davis, North American title, John Hawk B. Black Bart, Tony Norris and Sam Houston B. Rod Price and Dick Murdoch DQ. January 29 Niagara Falls, New York, WWF, Henry Godwin B. Bob Holly 2 stars, Quang B. Barry Hardy 1 star, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart 2.5 stars, Mabel B. IRS stud, WWF Tag Title, Smoking Guns B. Well Done 3.5 stars, Shawn Michaels B. Aldo Montoya 3 stars, King Kong Bundy B. Davey Boy Smith 1.5 star, IC Title, Razor Ramon B. Jeff Jarrett DQ 2.5 stars. January 30 Memphis, USWA, 1100, Moondog Spot B. Jimmy Harris, King Cobra B. Spellbinder DQ, Miss Texas and Moondog Rex B. Reggie B. Fine and Sweet Georgia Brown, Gorgeous George III B. Scott Stud, Street Fight, PG-13 B. Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert, 60-minute marathon match with Jerry Lawler vs. Brian Christopher vs. Bill Dundee in 10-minute intervals, so Lawler record 3 wins as opposed to 2 for the other two to earn title shot. January 31 Tokyo Ota Ward Gym, New Japan, 2600, Yuji Nagata beat Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Koji Kanemoto beat Tokumitsu Ishizawa, El Samurai and Osamu Kido beat Norio Oniga and Gran Hamada, Dean Malenko beat Shinjiro Otani, Ron Simmons beat Tadao Yasuda, Shinya Hashimoto and Manabu Nakanishi beat Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka, Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Kensuke Sasaki beat Mike Enos and 2 Cold Scorpio, Riki Choshu and Keiji Muto and Junji Hirata beat Hiro Saito and Masachono and Scott Norton. January 31 Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Shocker and Pantera 2 and El Hijo del Solitario beat Tornado Negro I and Felino and Alco Negro Jr., Brazo de Plata and Negro Casas and Ultimo Dragon B. El Satanico and Pierre Oth Jr. and Mano Negra, Distrito Federal HWT title, Brazo de Oro B. Gran Marcus Jr. to win title. February 1 Mexico City El Cortijo Bull Ring, Promel, Los Matematicos 2 and 3 B. D'Angelo Jr. and Estrella Guerrera, Octagon Cheeto and Mascara de Sagrada B. La Parquita and Fuercita Guerrera, Psicosis and Karloff Lagarde Jr. B. Rey Mysterio Jr. and Super Astro, Mil Mascaras and Villano 3 and El Mexicano B. Angel Blanco Jr. and Pero Silva and Santo Negro. February 2 Quebec City, K, WWF, 6000, Aldo Montoya B. Quang, Davey Boy Smith B. Bob Backlund, WWF Women's Title, Alundra Blaze B. Bull Nakano, Shawn Michaels B. Pierre Carla Ulat, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart, Adam Bomb B. Henry Godwin, WWF Title, Diesel B. King Kong Bundy DQ, IC Title, Razor Ramon B. Jeff Jarrett Core, 1-2-3 Kid and Bob Holly B. Heavenly Bodies, Lex Luger B. Tatanka. February 2 Orlando Disney MGM Studios, WCW Worldwide Tapings, 600 sellout / all freebies, non-squash results, WCW TV title, Jim Duggan B. Arnold Anderson DQ, Harlem Heat B. Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot. February 2 Takagawa, New Japan, 1550, Black Cat B. Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Koji Kanemoto B. Yuji Nagata, Shinjiro Otani B. Tokumitsu Ishizawa, Dean Malenko and El Samurai B. Gran Hamada and Norio Oniga, Ron Simmons B. Manabu Nakanishi, Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Kensuke Sasaki B. Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka, Masachono and Hiro Saito B. Riki Choshu and Osamu Kido, Shinya Hashimoto and Keiji Muto and Junji Hirata B. Scott Norton and Mike Enos and 2 Cold Scorpio. February 2 Maryville, Tennessee, SMW, 235, Boo Bradley B. Chris Condito, Ricky Morton B. Unabomb DQ, Tracy Smothers and Robert Gibson B. The Gangstas, Dirty White Boy B. Buddy Landell. February 2 Mexico City Pista Arena Revolucion, EMLL, El Cortado and Undifas and Zando Con 2 BRO2 and Atlantico and Huracan Sevilla Mississippi 1 and Emilio Charles Jr. and Ari Romero B. Silver King and Dandy and Brazo de Oro, Gran Marcus Jr. and Pierre Oth Jr. B. Mil Mascaras and Oscaris, Hair vs. Hair, Bestia Salvaje B. Black Power 2 DQ. February 2 Indianapolis, Circle City Wrestling, 240 sellout, Gary Hart B. Dan Shannon, Barroom Brawler B. Gordy Jones, Judge Dredd B. Mike Samples, Bone Crusher Lewis B. Flash Flanagan, Samples and Flanagan B. Phantoms. February 2 Plymouth, North Carolina, Independent Championship Wrestling, 150, Bubba Storm B. James Strader, J.S. Storm B. Robbie Lee, Ricky Rhodes B. Kevin Reed, Dark Star B. Untouchable, Mark Ash B. Mike Majors. February 3 Montreal, WWF, 12,113, Aldo Montoya B. Quang 1 star, Davey Boy Smith B. Bob Backlund 3 stars, WWF Women's Title, Alundra Blaze B. Bull Nakano 2 stars, Shawn Michaels B. Pierre Carlisle at 3½ stars, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart 1 star, Adam Bomb B. Henry Godwin 1 star, WWF Title, Diesel B. King Kong Bundy DQ 1 star, IC Title, Razor Ramon B. Jeff Jarrett Core 2½ stars, 1 2 3 Kid and Bob Holly B. Heavenly Bodies 1½ star, Lex Luger B. Tatanka 1 star. February 3 Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, New Japan, 6,000, Tokumitsu Ishizawa B. Yuji Nagata, El Samurai and Shinjiro Otani B. Koji Kanemoto and Gran Hamada, Handicap Match, El Gigante B. Black Cat and Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka B. Ron Simmons and 2 Cold Scorpio, Riki Choshu and Osamu Kido B. Hiroshi Hayes and Tadao Yasuda, IWGP Junior Title, Norio Onaga B. Dean Malenko, Rick and Scott Steiner B. Kensuke Sasaki and Manabu Nakanishi, Shinya Hashimoto B. Mike Enos, Junji Hirata and Hiroyoshi Tenzan B. Hiro Saito and Masa Chono, Scott Norton B. Keiji Muto 2031. February 3 Orlando Disney MGM Studios, WCW Worldwide Tapings, 600 sellout/all freebies, non-squash results, Steve Austin B. Marcus Bagwell, Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma B. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton, Steve Regal and Bobby Eaton B. Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner. February 3 Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, ECW, 400, 911 B. Young Dragon Stud, Steve Richards B. Dino Sandoff 1½ star, ECW Title, Shane Douglas B. Mikey Whipwreck 2 stars, Chris Benoit NC Tasmaniac 3½ stars, Tommy Dreamer B. Sandman 3 stars, ECW Tag Title, Public Enemy B. JT Smith and Hack Myers 2½ stars, Sabu B. Al Snow 4 stars. February 3 Hurley, Virginia, SMW, 450, Boo Bradley B. Chris Condito, Ricky Morton B. Uniblom DQ, Tracy Smothers and Robert Gibson B. The Gangstas, Dirty White Boy B. Buddy Landell. February 3 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, EVA, 2,200 sellout, Cynthia Moreno B. Kyoko Ichiki, Aguila Negra and Jiraiya Iceman B. Yoshihiro Tajiri, Taesuk Tao, and Takashi Okano, scaffold match for 1 staring HWT title, Hiroshi Ono B. Crypt Keeper to win title, bunkhouse match, Leatherface B. Nobutaka Araya, EVA title, Dick Slater B. Miguel Perez 26-35, no rope barbed wire death match, Cactus Jack B. Shoji Nakamaki. February 3 Chiba, All Japan Women, prelim results unavailable, Yumiko Hata and Tomoko Watanabe B. Suzuka Minami and Chapparita Osari, Jaguar Yokota B. Ritamata, Asia Kong and Kaoru Ito B. Kumiko Maekawa and Minami Toyota, Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue and Mariko Yoshida B. Toshio Imata and Atsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda. February 3 Calgary, Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling, Johnny Coltrane DJ J. Taylor, Jason Helton B. Katana, Mike Anthony, Mike Lazansky, B. Fernando Valentino, North American Mid-HWT title, Super Kungo B. Steve Rivers, Steve Gillespie and Freeze B. Steve Wild and Black Bart, Rick Titan B. Jerry Morrow DQ. February 3 Fall Branch, Tennessee, Southern States Wrestling, The Juicer B. Alabama Hearthrob, John Manson and She Quite B. Jeff Lovin and Scott Sterling, Frank Parker DDQ Roger Anderson, Bo James and War Machine B. Eddie Bruiser and Danny Christian, Killer Kyle B. Bobby Blaze. February 3 Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Ken Arden B. Scotty Fernandez, Sam Colt DDQ Black Terminator, Keith Hart B. The Seraph, Frank Morrell, Keith Hart B. Sweet Brown Sugar DQ, Jimmy Sharp and New One Man Gang and Mark Payne and Blazing Fury B. Chuck Colt and Adrian Champagne and Rick Justice and Fernandez, Frankie Lee B. Roger Sartain. February 3 St. Paul, North Carolina, All-Star Wrestling, Bam Bam Stevenson B. Timber the Lumberjack, Ricky Rhodes B. The Master, Jason Jaguar B. Super Vader DQ, Jaguar and Chip the Firebreaker, Curtis Thompson, Tker Hard Riders. February 3 Brooklyn, New York, Universal Superstars of America, Johnny Handsome B.A. Starling South Dakota, Jones DDQ American Ninja, Gino Caruso B. Christopher Michaels DQ, Tony Atlas B. Kodiak Bear, Bodyguard for Hired Kersal Belomo. February 4 Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, New Japan, 6,500 sellout. Black Cat beat Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Dean Malenko beat Tatsuhito Takaiwa, handicap match. El Gigante beat Tadao Yasuda and Yuji Nagata, Gran Hamada and Norio Onaga beat El Samurai and Two Cold Scorpio, Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka beat Manabu Nakanishi and Osamu Kido, Keiji Muto beat Ron Simmons, Kensuke Sasaki and Koji Kanemoto beat Hiroshi Hayes and Shinjiro Otani, Riki Choshu and Junji Hirata beat Masa Chono and Hiro Saito, Rick and Scott Steiner beat Scott Norton and Mike Enos, IWGP HWT title, Shinya Hashimoto beat Hiroyoshi Tenzan. February 4 Orlando Disney MGM Studios, WCW Worldwide Tapings, 600 sellout / all freebies, non-squash results, WCW TV title, Arnold Anderson d Alex Wright, Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot b The Butcher and Kevin Sullivan, WCW TV title. Wright b Anderson DQ, Steve Regal and Bobby Eaton b Bagwell and Patriot, Bunkhouse Buck b Tim Horner, Man with No Name, Ed Butcher Leslie, b Kevin Sullivan DQ. February 4 Barberville, Kentucky, SMW, 275, D. Low Brown b The Nightmare, Ted Allen, Loser Must Eat Dog Food, Boo Bradley b Chris Condito, Unabomb b Ricky Morton, No DQ No Time Limit, Buddy Landell b Dirty White Boy, The Gangstas b Tracy Smothers and Bob Armstrong. February 4 Dallas, NWA, 600, Rod Price b Sam Houston, The Wolverine b Dapper Dan, Dan Davis, Mike Davis b Chico Caballo, John Hawk b Tracy Austin, Scott Putski and Dick Murdoch b Black Bart and Chaz Taylor 3¼ stars, Caballo b Wolverine, Guido Falcone, Tim Roberts, and Vito Mussolini, Ken Rara, b Austin and Mike Davis, Randy Rhodes and Dapper Dan b Bo Vegas and Devin Michaels, Bart b Putski, Taylor b Rhodes, Caballo b Vegas, Bart and Tony Norris b Falcone and Mussolini 2¾ stars, Murdoch b Michaels, Houston b Price, North American title, Hawk b Norris 4¼ stars. February 4 Morristown, Tennessee, United Atlantic Wrestling, Rick Connors b Golden Angel, Diamond Dave b The Crow, 8-Ball Jones b Stan Lee, Brian Logan and Anthony Michaels d Nighthawks, Mongolian Stormperker Brian Lee. February 4 Ridgewood, Virginia, Atlantic Coast Wrestling, 803, Doug Gibson and Bill Maddox b Boris Chekhov and Lady Killer, Scorpion b Sergeant Rhodes, Dan Cooley and Hammerman b Mad Dog Davidson and Frank Parker, Pat Friday b Billy Black, Jimmy Valiant and East Coast Connection b Tim Blaze and Heartbreak Express, Bone Crusher Curtis b Wahoo McDaniel DQ. February 4 Union, South Carolina, All-Star Wrestling, Luscious Lonnie b J Eagle, Jerry Bragg, Jim Steele b Flamboyant Phil, Rob Van Dam b Glenn Gilbernetti, Jake Roberts b Super Vader, Walter McDonald. February 4 Chatsworth, Georgia, TWA, Scotty Fernandez b Joey Funk, Samurai Dragons b Adrian Champagne and Larry Blade, Outpatient b Sam Cole, Mark Payne and Blazing Fury b Planet Ranger and Moonlight, Craig Ward and Fernandez b Jimmy Sharp and New One Man Gang. February 4 Brighton, Iowa, CSWA, 96, Bubba Baker b Matt Taylor, Terry Anthony b Blaze, Rick Diamond b James Lee, Malachi Manson b Stud, Lunatic Maxter JW Thunder, Shadow Warriors b Punisher and Quicksilver. February 5 Orlando Disney MGM Studios, WCW Worldwide Tapings, 600 sellout / all freebies, non-squash results, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage b Avalanche and Butcher Dud, Steve Regal and Bobby Eaton b Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton 3 stars, Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot b Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma 3¼ stars, Dustin Rhodes and Alex Wright b Arnold Anderson and Blacktop Bully DQ 1½ star, Regal and Eaton b Bagwell and Patriot 2¾ stars, Hogan and Savage b Orndorff and Roma 2 stars. February 5 Hakodate, New Japan, 2550, Manabu Nakanishi b Yuji Nagata, Osamu Kido b Dean Malenko, Gran Hamada and Norio Onaga b Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Shinjiro Otani, handicap match, El Gigante b Black Cat and Tadao Yasuda, Junji Hirata b Two Cold Scorpio, Masachono and Hiro Saito b Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Koji Kanemoto, Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka b Riki Choshu and Keiji Muto, Shinya Hashimoto and Kensuke Sasaki and Masa Saito b Scott Norton and Ron Simmons and Mike Enos. February 5 Tonella, AAA, 9,000 sellout, winners and Aguila Delicero and El Sagrado b Karloff Agard Jr. and Pero Silva and Pekuto, Mask vs. Hair, La Sirenita B Shitara DQ, Mexican Trios titles, Tony Arce and Vulcano and Rocco Valente B Los Payasos to win titles, cage match, Los Villanos 3 and 4 and BBC and Carson Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000, Conan El Barbaro and Octagon and El Hijo del Santo and Cibernetico B Perro Aguayo and Eddie Guerrero and El Signo and Negro Navarro. February 5 Hiratsuka, Iwu, 500, Kikuzawa B Seiji Yamakawa, Katsumi Hirano B Okamura, mixed match, Zulima and Kishin Kawabata B Electra and Ryo Maike, White Mummy B Hiroshi Hatanaka DQ, Isamu Taranashi B Poison Sawada, Ryumago B Black Mummy, Masahiko Takasugi and Goro Tsurumi and Takeshi Miyamoto B Katsukata and Shun Matsuzaki and Apollo Sugawara. February 5 Dix Hills, New York, Independent Wrestling Federation, Primo Carnera 3 B Rocky Shaw South Dakota, Jones and Alexander the Great B Don Rock and Boss Hog Calhoun, Mongol Vile B Italian Sensation, L.A. Gore B Metal Maniac, Virgil B Mike Sharp, Jim Powers B Uncle Fester, Jimmy Snuka B Hercules. February 5 Jeffersonville, Indiana, Tri-State Wrestling, Phantoms B Doug Basham and Victor Lewis B Gordy Jones, Phantom Tragedy B Gary Jones, Mike Samples B Danny Davis, Phantom Sorrow B Basham, Samples and Lewis B Gordy and Gary Jones. February 5 Studio City, California, Slammers, Jeff Lindbergh B Movie Star Mike, El Toro Bravo and Bruce Bodine B Vern the Langdon and Tyrone Little, Dynamite D B Samoan Kid, Bodine B Bill Pearl, Bravo B Little. February 6 Lanier, North Carolina, SMW TV taping, 375, D. Low Brown B Wolfman, SMW TV title, Boo Bradley B Wolfman to win vacant title, Al Snow B George South, Snow B South, Tracy Smothers and Scott Armstrong B Infernos, Brian Logan and Anthony Michaels, SMW TV title, Bradley B Brimstone E Inferno, Logan, Billy Black B South, Snow and Uniblom B Wolfman and Michaels, SMW tag title, Snow and Uniblom B Rock and Roll Express DQ, Dirty White Boy B Logan, SMW TV title, Black B Bradley to win title, Buddy Landell B Michaels, Gangstas B Smothers and Armstrong, Dog Food match, Bradley B Chris Condito, Snow and Unibomb B South and Michaels, SMW TV title, Black B Logan, White Boy B Landell DQ. February 6 Memphis, USWA, Moondogs B Reggie B Fine and Sergeant Victor, Spellbinder B Tony Williams, Scott Stud B Gorgeous George III DQ, Big Daddy Cyrus and Crusher Bones B King Cobra and Doug Basham, Street Fight, Miss Texas B Sweet Georgia Brown, Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert B PG-13, USWA title, Brian Christopher B Cyrus DQ, Unified title, Jerry Lawler B Sid Vicious to win title. February 6 Jonesboro, Arkansas, Ozark Mountain Wrestling, 275, Steve Sexton B Superstar, Romeo Valentino B Sean Holt, Lightning Express, Not Original, B Dynamic Duo, J.R. Alzado B Rick Butler, Colorado Kid B Motley Crue, Spiders DDQ Glamour Boys. Japanese Television Rundown. January 14 JWP, 1. Sumio Toyama pinned Bomber Hikari in an upset in 10:24. The two had to be separated from each other after the match. Because this was an inter-promotional bout, there was good heat. 2.5 stars, 2. Devil Masami and Hiromi Yagi beat Hiromi Sugo and Kaoru in 16:10. Kaoru did a springboard moonsault into the ring for a new move. Typical JWP match except Sugo was out of her league with the other three. Masami pinned Sugo with a power bomb. After the match Chigusa Nagayo had a stare down with Masami and they ended up doing a spot where Nagayo used a spin kick and some headbutts before it was broken up. 3.25 stars, 3. Dynamite Kansai and Fusei Onauchi beat Cutie Suzuki and Candy Akutsu in 1838. Started slow but turned into a very good match. Kansai did well as the monster and Akutsu is a good young wrestler so they carried things. Kansai kicked the hell out of both girls in spots. Akutsu did a planche onto both her foes. Lots of near falls before Kansai hit the splash mountain. Razor's Edge dropped into a power bomb on Suzuki for the pin. 3.75 stars, 4. Mayumi Ozaki and Hikari Fukuoka beat Atsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda to win the JWP tag titles in 1954. A lot of great moves but in some ways it was missing something. At one point Shimoda pile drove Fukuoka on the bleachers. Ozaki did a planche onto both her foes. Mita and Shimoda did their double dive spot. There were a lot of near falls. At one point Fukuoka and Ozaki both came off the top rope together with double foot stomps on Shimoda. Finish saw Ozaki use the half Nelson suplex on Shimoda and then Fukuoka did the moonsault double foot stomp but actually missed the first. That looks to be a very difficult move because you have such a small area to make the landing hit, and barely grazed her on the second for the pin. 3 3/4 stars. January 14, New Japan, 1. Onaga retained the IWGP Junior title pinning Sasuke with law magistral, heavy metal cradle or dandana. Considering Sasuke was working this match with both a broken wrist and broken foot, it was pretty good. Sasuke did a high flip dive over the top and an Asai moonsault on the ramp. Sasuke hit a tombstone pile driver and went for a moonsault, but Onaga got his knees up and scored the pin in 14:39. 3 3/4 stars. 2. Hawk pinned Scott Norton in 7:41. Norton DDT'd Hawk on the ramp. Norton and Animal argued throughout the match. Finish saw Norton tripped by Animal and Hawk hit a clothesline off the top for the pin. It was bad, but not as bad as some of the other matches on this show. 1/2 1 star. 3. Hashimoto pinned Sasaki in 1936 to retain the IWGP title. Very different world title match. It was intense and worked stiff and believable but more gripping than exciting. Many people wouldn't like the match, but others will love it. Hashimoto was very impressive working as a champion here and is easily the most underrated world champion in wrestling. Toward the end, Sasaki used the power special, a submission, several times but Hashimoto kept making the ropes. At one point power suplexed Hashimoto on his head. Hashimoto also survived the reverse Ipponze, judo hip lock. Finally Hashimoto took out the ankle with a low roundhouse kick and hit a DDT and a spin kick for near falls before using a fisherman buster, fisherman suplex dropped straight down, for the pin. Both hugged after the match. 4 stars. January 21, New Japan, 1. Sabu and Chono beat Fujinami and Harada in 11:18. Sabu was a one-man show here. The match had a great open with Sabu flying all over the place including running on the ramp, leaping off a chair with a crossbody. It slowed in the middle with mat wrestling. Sabu somersaulted from the apron inside into a leg drop on Harada. Sabu used a chair. Highlight was Sabu putting a chair flat on the turnbuckle and setting up another chair standing on that chair, putting Harada on a table, and leaping off the high chair with a leg drop onto Harada going through the table. Harada started a comeback but Sabu hit him with a chair but Chono did a Yakuza kick for the pin. 2 3/4 stars. 2. Tenzan pinned Nakanishi in 7:40. Very stiff but kind of slow. Tenzan did a moonsault and a tombstone before winning with an airplane spin dropped into a suplex. 2 stars. 3. Kanemoto pinned Nagata in 14:43. This was a surprise as Nagata was very impressive. Only negative was the lack of heat and the fact Kanemoto hit the shooting star press out of nowhere, and nearly landed headfirst on Nagata. 3 1/4 stars. 4. Otani pinned Samurai to keep the UA Junior HWT title in 15:17. Excellent high-flying match. Samurai got several near falls. Otani made a comeback doing both a springboard plancha and a springboard dropkick. He used a Frankensteiner off the top but Samurai reversed the pin into a cradle of his own. Samurai used a reverse DDT and a Frankensteiner off the top of his own. Samurai hit 2 devastating power bombs but Otani kicked out both times. Finally Otani used a dragon suplex for the pin. 4 1/4 stars. 5. Muto and Hayes kept the IWGP tag titles beating Steiners in 25-12. Another super match. A lot of great moves back and forth. Muto went for the wind sprint clothesline but Rick ducked and Scott clotheslined Muto and threw him off the ramp. Scott then destroyed Muto with move after move, suplexes in the ring and on the ramp and off the ropes and stiff moves. At one point it was a 4-way and simultaneously, Muto gave Rick a Frankensteiner at the same time Scott gave one to Hayes. Scott hit the dragon suplex on Muto and went for the STD, vertical suplex dropped straight down like a pile driver, but Muto reversed it into a tombstone and finally tagged Hayes. Hayes was cut off and destroyed as well. Finish saw Rick give Hayes an unprotected German suplex, then give one to Muto but somehow Muto landed on his feet instead of his back, hit a dropkick on the stunned Nick and immediately Hayes did the Northern Lights suplex for the win. This was the best Muto has looked in a long time. 4 1/4 stars. January 21, All Japan, 1. Takao Mori and Jun Akiyama beat Abdullah the Butcher and Giant Kimala 2. Abby's pants are higher than ever. Really 2 carries the team now and he's good for a 400-pounder doing dropkicks. Akiyama pinned 2 with a Northern Lights suplex. 2 1/4 stars. 2. Dan Crawford and Doug Furness beat Stan Hansen and Johnny Smith in 13:56 when Crawford pinned Smith with a Tiger Driver. Match started slow but was good toward the finish. 2.5 stars. 128 New Japan, 1. The first two matches were from the Tokyo Dome. First, Tiger Jeet Singh Sr. and Jr. beat Shiro Koshinaka and Miyoshi Ohara in 11:23 when Sr. used the Cobra Claw on Ohara. Even Koshinaka couldn't save this. 1 star, 2. Riki Choshu and Yoshiaki Yatsu beat Kengo Kimura and Tatsutoshi Goto when Choshu pinned Kimura after 2 lariats. Even with Choshu involved, fans didn't seem to care. 1 star, 3. Remainder of the show was from a Heisei Shingun show. Goto and Great Kabuki beat Yatsu and Isao Takagi when Goto pinned Takagi with his dangerous back suplex. Kabuki is now bald, which, with the face paint, makes him look like Hawk's father. Match had heat. After the match, Yatsu went to Masa Saito, who was doing color commentary, and asked him to come to the dressing room with him, setting them up as a tag team for the February 12th show. 2 stars, 4. Kimura went to a no contest with Iramichi Fuyuki when Geto and Kunyaki Kobayashi both interfered. Fans hated the finish. Dud, 5. Sabu and Masachono beat Koshinaka and Ohara in 14:09. It was good when Koshinaka and Chono were against each other. At one point, Sabu put Ohara on a table on the floor and leapt over the top rope with a leg drop onto Ohara going through the table. Sabu missed a leg drop with a chair on Koshinaka. Ohara made a comeback using a chokeslam on both. When he had Chono up for a superplex, Sabu hit him with a chair. Chono then scored the pin with a Yakuza kick to the face. 2.75 stars. EMLL. Ruben Juarez Jr., son of the early 70s headliner in Los Angeles, who has been doing local shows in Monterrey, is scheduled to start in Mexico City shortly. Ciclin Chito Ramirez is out for a few weeks with broken fingers. The same Jason the Terrible, who lives in Australia but is originally from New York, that worked TCW over the weekend, is coming in here starting on February 17th, which I guess says that new one-starring promoter Mickey Ibaragi is trying to make a talent deal with this group since relations with Victor Quiñones, IWA, fell apart. Prata Morgan and El Satanico and Espectro Jr. are reforming the Infernales trio, which has taken many shapes and forms over the years. Bestia Salvaje defeated Black Power 2 in a hair versus hair match on February 2 at Pista Arena Revolucion in Mexico City via DQ when Andy Foss, Power's second, was caught giving Salvaje a low blow. Mil Mascaras did a rare job in the semi-final, a tag match with Dos Caras losing to Gran Marcus Jr. and Pierre Auth Jr. when Marcus pinned Mascaras in the deciding fall, which was done to set up an EVO heavyweight title match on February 9, which Mascaras will surely win. On the same show in the semi-final, it's Silver King vs Ari Romero, hair versus hair. It's interesting given the promotional situation, which I guess says something for Mascara's status, that he worked in Mexico City on February 1 for Promel and on February 2 worked for CMLL, EMLL offshoot. Galavision over the weekend saw first the January 24 at Arena Coliseum main event as Brazo de Oro and Vampiro Canadiense and La Fiera won. February 3 falls from Marcus Jr. and Mano Negra and Black Magic when Brazo de Oro pinned Marcus in the deciding fall. The match was awful, 1 star, with all 3 falls combined lasting only 7:41. The finish was done to set up a match in the same building where Marcus would defend the Distrito Federal Heavyweight title, equivalent in the old U.S. system to a Florida or Georgia state title, against Oro, which Oro won. Marcus had held the title since 1989. They only aired the finish from January 27 at Arena Coliseum with Felino and Bestia Salvaje and Arcangel de la Muerte beating Negra Casas and Ultimo Dragon and Mascara Magica when Dragon was pinned. Based on what aired, the match wasn't nearly as good as the talent would indicate. They aired the complete main event with El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Emilio Charles Jr. beating Dos Caras and Atlantis, and Hector Garza won. Once again Satanico made Garza submit in the third fall to keep that feud alive, 3.25 stars, although it'll have to be put on hold for a few weeks as Satanico wasn't booked for February 3 and Garza was leaving for a war tour right after that show. The February 10 headliner is Vampiro and Atlantis and Silver King vs Wagner and Salvaje and El Hijo del Gladiador. I'd guess it's no coincidence that they've got Garza's ring outfits and even his look almost a copy of AAA's Latin Lover, while February 3 was Garza and Silver King and La Fiera vs Charles and Wagner and Magic. Crowds last week were up from previous weeks, with Tuesday looking to be about 1,000 and Friday around 1,500. El Texano had knee surgery and will be back in March. Title matches from the week before last, no results available. were Silver King defending the CMLL heavyweight strap on January 29 versus Brata Morgan and Pierre Roth Jr. defending the Mexican heavyweight title on January 25 in Acapulco against Dos Caras. Black Magic returned to Florida on February 6 and won't return until June. AAA. A correction from last week's issue. Juan Francisco Cortez was not dropped as part of the front office. What actually happened is that Televisa is cutting back many of its companies and everyone thought as part of streamlining that Cortez's role would be eliminated. He's not out of the blocks as supposedly a decision on Cortez's future is to be made in the next 2 weeks. Televisa officials are coming to New York on February 16 to meet with IWC about upcoming American house shows. Nothing is confirmed but IWC is talking about no house shows in the US until April at the earliest, which would probably be another California tour. However, Antonio Peña has been given far more business control of the company and will be promoting more shows on his own. The February 5 show in Tonalá, which was the biggest card so far this year, drew a sellout 9,000. They changed the configuration of the building for this show so it wasn't the capacity that it had been in the past, with a Conan and Santo and Octagon and Cibernetico vs Perro Aguayo and Eddie Guerrero and El Signo and Negro Navarro main event. The storyline isn't that Aguayo is going heel, but that Aguayo hasn't forgiven Conan while the other faces have. Aguayo's deal is that he hates Conan so much he's willing to team with heels in order to get in the ring against him. When Aguayo fought the other faces, he worked totally scientific. And while Conan tried to work scientific with Aguayo, Aguayo worked as a heel against him. However, Aguayo couldn't get along with his teammates and they turned on him and the faces including Conan made the save. Aguayo then shoved away Conan when he tried to apologize and challenged him to a hair versus hair match. Conan then responded by turning it down, saying he had made a mistake in the past and had gotten self-centered, but he was sorry and wanted to make amends, but Aguayo refused to make up with him. During the match, Conan debuted a Niagara driver while standing on the middle rope on Guerrero, Dynamite Kansai's die-hard finisher. The Killer and Andy Barrow were at ringside cheering on Guerrero waving the American flag, and it looks like those two along with Enrique Vera are headed to Promel. The Villanos Dinamita cage match saw Villanos work as the faces, but the crowd largely cheered the Dinamitas. It was over-the-top rules and there was a lot of mask ripping and mask taking off, so Villanos didn't want to leave the mat because by climbing out it would expose their faces, so even though they could have won they chose not to until finally V4 put Universo's mask on, which was also taken off, and climbed out to win the match. The Martha Villalobos vs La Sirenita women's hair versus hair match was changed as Villalobos was injured, probably not legit, probably because she didn't want her head shaved, the previous Wednesday, and was replaced by Shitara. Villalobos and their manager kept interfering on Sirenita, who juiced heavy. Even though the work wasn't good, there was a lot of heat and Shitara wound up DQ'd and lost her mask. The new rule in Mexico regarding stipulations is that if someone is booked in a stipulation match and no shows for any reason, they either must lose their mask or submit to getting their head shaved before they can work again, so Villalobos had to appear at the building and find a replacement to agree to lose a hair or mask, or she'd have to submit to a haircut whenever she decreed she had recovered. Also, Los Destructores won the Mexican Trios belts from Los Payasos after winning the non-title match on January 28 in Guanajuato. Villalobos supposedly badly sprained her ankle landing wrong jumping off the apron onto the floor in a very simple spot on February 1 in Aguascalientes. In that match, two of the Face Trio members were Irma Gonzalez, the mother of Lola Gonzalez, who started wrestling in the late 50s and was a regular in the old Texas circuit in the 60s, and Irma Aguilar, who I remember going back to at least the late 60s working Southern California. February 6 in Puerto Vallarta drew a sellout 4,000 as Guerrero and Cien Caras and Espectro beat Conan and Parca and Cibernetico when Guerrero pinned Conan clean in the third fall to set up a singles match down the road for Conan's UWA title plus Fuerza and Juventud. Guerrero retained the Mexican tag titles, beating Rey Mysterio and Rey Mysterio Jr. Psicosis also had his first television match back from the suspension on the show, which included the beginning of the Santo Negro vs. Santo feud. Weekend Galavision aired the top two matches from January 6 in Mexico City. Los Hermanos Dinamita beat Los Villanos in a three-fall match in which all three falls ended in DQ finishes, the final with Universo dos Mil losing his mask getting Villanos DQ'd. Match wasn't that good, but they had a lot of heat in the third fall, 1.5 star. Main was Latin Lover and La Parca and Octagon and Santo over Conan and Guerrero and Fuerza Guerrera and Heavy Metal. The match was a backdrop for the Conan face turn, which got over really strong, although the show was edited, so much of the turns such as the cake in the face and the mic work were edited off the television show because they were cramming two long matches into a 50-minute segment. The high spots during this match were incredible with fast speed and perfect execution. But there was also a lot of arguing among the heels for the breakup and Guerrero really working hard trying to be a heel in the Love Machine mode. As a wrestler, Guerrero in this match was a Benoit caliber and metal is a lot better as a Roto heel than he was as a Technico. Parka clowned around too much but was over like crazy while both Latin and Conan were much better than usual doing high-flying acrobatic spots. Match ended with the faces taking 2 straight, 3.5 stars. Juan Herrera of CMLL, EMLL satellite group that runs Thursday nights at Pista Arena Revolucion, went to Fuerza Guerrera to ask about a talent exchange but at this point no deal has been made. Robin Hood, a younger brother of Los Brazos, is headed in and will form a trio with El Sagrado, formerly Lasser, his old tag partner from the late 80s, and Gamma, which would potentially be the best flying trio in the country, so I'm told. The current plan, and you know how that goes, is for the first Triple Mania to be April 30th in Guadalajara at Rio Nila Coliseum and another one in Veracruz in May. Next major show is February 15th at Wanda La Brera Gym in Mexico City. All Japan. The television show on January 28 aired the final 22-minute of the 60-minute tag title draw with Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi vs Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao, and depending upon the report it ranged from 4.75 stars to 5 stars but apparently wasn't quite as good as the previous 2 matches between the 2 teams. The show drew a strong 2.8 rating. New Japan. They held the annual early February Sapporo 2 straight night shows on February 3rd and February 4th. Coming about 500 tickets shy of capacity the first night in a 6,500-seat arena, and selling out the second night. Traditionally they've packed the house both nights in the past. In the highlights of the first night, Norio Onaga retained the IWGP Junior title pinning Dean Malenko with a dandana in 16:15, Rick and Scott Steiner beat Manabu Nakanishi and Kensuke Sasaki in 12:55 when Scott pinned Nakanishi with the DDT off the shoulders of Rick. Hiroyoshi Tenzan debuted his new finisher called TTD. Tenzan Tombstone Driver, on Hiro Saito winning a tag match for himself and partner Junji Hirata over Saito and Masachono, and the main event was a number 1 contenders match for a February 19 IWGP title match at Sumo Hall where Scott Norton pinned Keiji Muto with a powerslam in 20:31. February 4th was headlined by the much-pushed Shina Hashimoto title defense against Tenzan. As expected, they did the typical storyline in that situation where the younger wrestler gets chance after chance but the veteran survives, with Hashimoto kicking out of the TTD, moonsault and mountain bomb, airplane spin position dropped into a power bomb, before Hashimoto unloaded with the furious kicks and won in 17:02 with the Fisherman Buster. As usual in Hashimoto's title matches, he suffered a bloody nose. I wonder how he does this since it happens in every title match and does give the title match an edge of realism. There was nothing of major surprise underneath with Steiners over Norton and Mike Ennis in the semifinal. February 5th in Hakodate saw a major upset as the JJ Jacks, Akira Nagami and Takayuki Iizuka, beat Riki Choshu and Muto when Nagami for the first time scored a pinfall on Muto using the Dragon Suplex. The January 28 television show did a 2.1 rating. At the North Korea show on April 28 they are doing an opening torch-carrying ceremony a la the Olympic Games, and Antonio Inoki will be the one running into the stadium with the Olympic torch. Other Japan notes. War announced its March 26 Sumo Hall show which goes head-to-head with All Japan Women at Yokohama Arena. Main event is a surprise Genichiro Tenryu vs Yokozuna. They are also having an 8-man one-night junior heavyweight tournament with the first round having Yuji Yasirioka vs Gedo, 1-2-3 Kid vs unnamed MLL representative, Lionheart, Chris Jericho, vs Masao Orihara and Ultimo Dragon vs Ultimate Dragon. All Japan Women did a television taping on February 3 in Chiba with no major results but a significant angle. Dump Matsumoto was brought back to do color commentary on the show. Jaguar Yokota wrestled Ritamata in a prelim match and they brought in Lioness Asuka and Bison Kimura to be in Yokota's corner, and after the match Bison challenged Dump to return to the ring. Saki Hasegawa is out of action with an injury, so the scheduled Blizzard Yuki vs Asuka match for this week most likely won't happen. All Japan Women announced a kickboxing match for March 26 at Yokohama Arena with Lucia Rauker of Holland, the famous world champion kickboxer who was originally supposed to face Kyoko Inoue at the Tokyo Dome, facing Toshio Yamada. Eva ran a big show on February 3 at Korakuen Hall headlined by a no-rope barbed wire match with Cactus Jack vs Shoji Nakamaki. To build up the match, Cactus went into shops in Tokyo buying as many thumbtacks as he could, totally supposed 3,000 or so, and put them by the ring post. Since Nakamaki wanted to do a tope, they only used 3 strands of barbed wire on one side, as opposed to the crisscrossing barbed wire they use normally, but it gave way early and soon there was an open area on one side. Finally Jack put the thumbtacks on the mat and Nakamaki took a bump on them and was pinned. This was done to set up a sick rematch on March 7 at Korakuen Hall called a Thumbtacks Death Match, where they'll get 25,000 thumbtacks and put them all over the ringside area, so anyone taking a bump out of the ring will be doing it on thumbtacks. With Miki Ibaragi planning on reviving One Staring next month as competition to this group, they had Crypt Keeper, who held the One Staring World Heavyweight title when the group folded, bring the belt into the ring for a scaffold match against Hiroshi Ono. Ono knocked Keeper off the scaffold using the baseball bat on fire to win the title, so when One Staring reopens and tries to crown a world title, fans will believe Ono is the rightful champion, having beaten the last champion, I guess. As a contrast, the EVA World title saw Dick Slater pin Miguel Perez in 26:35 of a totally scientific match where they never left the ring. 2 Japanese groups have international shows in the next few weeks. EVA runs in Dominica, Santo Domingo in the Caribbean on February 12 with a tournament to decide the new Mexico version, World Middleweight Champion. If you recall, EMLL promised EVA's Victor Quiñones the belt. Ultimo Dragon to Super Astro to EVA was the plan, but Dragon instead won the NWA middleweight belt from Lionheart and instead of dropping the UWA belt to Astro as promised, simply vacated the title. Anyway, Quiñones apparently has made a deal with UWA's Carlos Maines to gain possession of that title for now, probably for Takashi Okano. Headhunters will defend the EVA tag titles on that show. Rings, which already did a Monster House last year in Russia, does its second international show on February 19 in Amsterdam, Holland, with Akira Maeda vs. Chris Dolman, Dick Leon Frey vs. Mitsuya Nagai and Hans Nyman vs. Andrei Kopelev. They are strongly hinting that at the first GIA Japan show on April 15 at Korakuen Hall that the main event would be Chigusa Nagaya vs. Shinobu Kandori, and that the War April 2 Korakuen Hall show would be headlined by Tenryu vs. Shiro Koshinaka. Heisei Ishingun announced February 12 at Korakuen Hall headlined by Tatsutoshi Goto and Kabuki and Koshinaka vs. Riki Choshu and Yoshiaki Yatsu and Masa Saito, which is the main event rumored last week but officially announced this past week. Also Koji Kanemoto vs. Sakatoshi Saito and Kengo Kimura and Kunyaki Kobayashi vs. Sabu and Tasmaniac. This may air on ECW television as an ECW Tag Team title match. USWA. Jerry Lawler finally regained the unified title from Sid Vicious on February 6 in Memphis, since Vicious is leaving for WWF in a few weeks. Vicious did his one and only Memphis job when interference from Spellbinder backfired. After the match, manager Big Business Brown and his tag team of Crusher Bones and Big Daddy Cyrus, 2 300-plus-pound newcomers who debuted on television 2 days earlier splitting up a battle royal, all attacked Vicious to turn him face. Vicious was getting a lot of cheers in most of the cities even as a heel the past few weeks, particularly in some recent matches with Brian Christopher. It was probably the only way to get Vicious to do the job was with outside interference and a face turn coming at the end of it. The January 30th show with the 3-way 60-minute marathon match to earn the title shot saw Lawler score 3 pins as opposed to 2 for Christopher and Bill Dundee. Apparently Christopher had Lawler beaten, but Dundee somehow cost him the tying pin, which started a bigger feud between the two. Dundee is still technically a face, but being a smartass face. Lawler and Dundee continued the shoot interviews talking about WWF and WCW, which led to drawing the Big House, 2,400, last time they met, but this time the crowd was back down to the normal 1,100. Dundee was scheduled to challenge for Christopher's USWA title on February 6, but Dundee missed the show because of transportation problems and Cyrus got the shot and lost via DQ when his partner and manager interfered. They really pushed strongly the idea that Lawler would win the title, including doing an 8-minute career retrospective on him on television Saturday. The biggest television angle on February 4 saw Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert do a blinding angle with Wolfie D. They had a tag team match scheduled with Rich and Gilbert vs. PG-13 for February 6, but it wound up with JC Ice against both for most of the way because D was selling the blinding angle from TV. D finally got in and they threw something in his eyes again and beat him. As it has been for probably the past 15 years, the highest-rated television wrestling show in the United States remains the Saturday Morning Live Memphis show on WMC-TV, averaging a 10 rating. At its peak in the late 70s to mid-80s, before pro wrestling got popular, the show did as high as 23 ratings and Super Bowl-like 70 shares. Within the Memphis area had more viewers at its peak than any television show in the market but one, including all three network primetime fare. The only show that beat it during its peak was the then popular primetime soap Dallas. SMW. Most of the news stems from the television tapings on February 6 in Lanier, North Carolina, which saw the two open spots filled by Billy Black and Al Snow. Black debuted and quickly won the TV title from Boo Bradley. The title was vacant after Buddy Landel retained it for 5 straight weeks and Bradley beat the Wolfman in the first hour of tapings. In the third hour of tapings, Black beat Bradley when Black missed a moonsault and feigned a knee injury. Bradley told the ref to stop the match, and when his back was turned, Black got on the middle rope and came down with a bulldog headlock for the pin to set up a feud between the two of them, since Chris Condito will be leaving after the February 26 show. Snow is taking Eddie Gilbert's spot as the tag team partner of Unabomber, Glenn Jacobs, for their feud with the Rock and Roll Express over the SMW tag team titles. The first show, aired February 18, opened with Rock and Roll doing an interview saying that Gilbert had been fired by SMW for refusing to pay a fine, roughing up Ron West, front office employee, and tearing up the SMW offices, which is all a pretty mean trick when he's been nowhere near town since his one and only appearance. During the match where Bradley won the TV title, Condito was doing color and made a remark that if he couldn't beat Bradley, he might as well not even stay in SMW. Jim Ross continued to goad him about the remark and finally shamed him into accepting loser leaves town stipulations in the match in Knoxville on February 26. Jerry Lawler is doing spots on television giving hygiene tips, which is basically the same way they introduced Tammy Fitch about a year and a half ago. They redid the two famous Rick Steamboat Ric Flair suit ripping angles with Buddy Landel and Dirty White Boy. Landel did an interview talking about how he's beaten White Boy and Tracy Smothers, showing clips of him getting his hand raised, when Ross interrupted him and mentioned he used brass knucks to beat White Boy and a chain to beat Smothers. Then Landel made a crack about Dirty White Girl, and White Boy came out and tore Landel's sports jacket, shirt and pants off and left him in his tie, his underwear and his socks in mid-ring. Snow debuted and he and Unabomber are being called the Dynamic Duo. Snow actually beat George South twice. Apparently Snow hadn't worked a television squash match in years, and in those days, it was he that was the one getting squashed, so he spent so much time trying to get over his cocky heel attitude that by the time he started wrestling, he had to go home. So he live challenged South for a rematch and offered him $100 to come out. South agreed, and they did a match with hot moves that will be spliced into the first match when it airs on television. Jim Cornette did an interview asking Bob Armstrong to be the special ref for the Gangstas and D. Lo Brown vs. Heavenly Bodies and Cornette match on February 26 in Knoxville as his one favor, and Armstrong agreed to do it. As Cornette and Armstrong were out, Gangstas and Brown came out and surrounded them and were about to jump them when Smothers and Scott Armstrong came out. After Smothers and Scott won a squash, all three Gangstas jumped them when Cornette and Bob made the save, and at the end Cornette and Bob shook hands. On the second hour, Black debuted doing a Georgia Hick heel gimmick somewhat similar to Skinner, looking tremendous, doing an elbow off the top said to put Randy Savage in his prime to shame. In the Dynamic Duo tag matches, Snow sits at the desk and does color while Unabomber destroys both jobbers by himself. After the match, Rock and Rolls came out and challenged them to a title match right there. The match saw Snow post Morton, who juiced, and they sold it like he'd been knocked silly as he wandered around ringside, and Gibson worked it 1-on-2 until Morton ran in and cleaned house with a chair, getting R&Rs DQ'd. Third hour, which airs the weekend after the February 26 Knoxville show as the beginning of new programs, saw White Boy do an interview talking about the March Madness Tour, which is just a series of regular shows which he'll headline in cage matches against Landel, using a local media personality in each town as the keeper of the key. They announced the next major show as Bluegrass Brawl 3 on April 6 in Pikeville, Kentucky. Television main was Gangstas vs. Scott and Tracy with Cornette as their manager. Smothers juiced. Finish saw Scott have New Jack up for a body slam when D. Lo Brown hit Scott in the knee with the nightstick and New Jack fell on him for the pin. While the pin was going on, Cornette hit Brown with the tennis racket. The Gangstas and Brown, with Scott selling his knee, started beating on Smothers and Cornette when Bob Armstrong hit the ring, and finally they went 3-on-1 on Bob before burying him under a black flag before Cornette recovered enough to throw his racket to Smothers, who made the save. Final show, which doesn't air until March 11, saw another Dynamic Duo squash with Snow spending the entire match doing color. After Unabomber used the powerbomb finisher, Snow ran to the ring and asked to be tagged in and score the pin himself. During an interview on one of the shows, Snow did get in his line to Jim Ross about he and Unabomber leaving to go back to the dressing room to have sex. Cornette did an interview saying that at Bluegrass Brawl 3 he wants to manage Bob Armstrong and Smothers vs. Gangstas and D-Lo Brown, and says he wants to pick their third member of the team. At the house shows this past week, the first Scott and Smothers vs. Gangstas matches didn't take place since Scott gave word he was going to work for WCW at Disney instead, although he didn't, since Brad Armstrong's partner in the glorified jobber role at Disney was instead Tim Horner. Robert Gibson subbed the first two nights while in Barberville, Kentucky on February 4. Bob subbed. Barberville, which usually draws in the 550 to 650 range, was down to 275, largely blamed on bad weather. Both SMW and USWA will start on Wiles in Chicago this week. ECW. The deal we talked about last week with WUM in Birmingham, Alabama is a done deal. In fact, the station did some promotional work with several of the wrestlers, and they did a local angle with Shane Douglas and Tully Blanchard at a racetrack. They are also close to making a deal for New Orleans television and running house shows and television tapings from a local casino. Besides the ECW arena, they also did a spot show on February 3 before about 400 at a nightclub in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, with no major angles coming out of it but Sabu beating Al Snow in a 4 stars match on top. Both Terry Funk and DC Drake were talked with about coming into feud with Cactus Jack. The Funk deal fell through and Drake deal was supposed to begin on February 4, however Drake was stranded somewhere in New England and couldn't make it in. Don't be surprised to see him come in. The January 31 television show may have been the best ECW hour to date. It featured 2 4 1/4 stars matches, one with Sabu and Tasmaniac vs. Public Enemy and the other a Falls Count Anywhere with Sandman vs. Cactus Jack, both from January 16 in Orlando, Florida. Jack did an excellent interview at the end saying he'd hang it up if he couldn't beat Sandman in their death match in Philadelphia. The reason Jason the Terrible worked the February 4 card is because his promoter, Miki Ibaragi of the New One Staring in Japan, was there to make a deal. Ibaragi was looking to bring in several ECW wrestlers, because Weekly Pro Wrestling pushes every ECW Philadelphia show as if it's a major US event. ECW has a strong hardcore following in the Tokyo area particularly. Ibaragi was looking at headlining his first tour with Public Enemy the last week of March. They are in the talking stages but the deal isn't completed. In addition, Eva's Victor Quiñones, who had a falling out with this group more than 1 year ago, when Headhunters no-showed a main event, is attempting to mend fences using Cactus Jack as a liaison. Ibaragi verbally agreed to Heyman's terms, but it's not a done deal and there is dressing room heat over Ibaragi announcing guys as appearing in Japan before the deal was done, and over announcing Tasmaniac, who is a regular for Heisei Shingun, as appearing on the tour. Here and there. Herb Abrams has supposedly secured a short-term, March and April, deal to get a weekly time slot on ESPN2. ESPN continues its streak of always getting the worst possible wrestling that's on the market. Someone in the company must have a self-fulfilling prophecy about nobody being interested in pro wrestling and wants to deliver ratings to prove that point. A smart promoter looking for exposure should set up a contact with ESPN2 if Abrams gets a regular time slot and try to pounce on the opening if the deal explodes. Some more notes about the NatB convention last week in Las Vegas. There was someone, Howard Brody out of Florida, who was shopping around a New Japan demo tape but only for international distribution. The show he was shopping around was the English version of New Japan that airs in Germany and Austria. The reason the Japanese don't seem interested in getting on American television is that there is no real money to be made in getting wrestling on the air. A key wrestling syndicator told us that he believes just based on the rare incidence of Japanese quality matches on WWF with 1-2-3 Kid and the crowd response shows people, if exposed, would enjoy it. But it would be a slow process because suspension of disbelief wrestling has taken a hit from WWF and WCW, who openly are competing primarily for children's storybook wrestling without athletic seriousness, and that's how the general public views wrestling. In addition, since both WWF and WCW primarily pay to get on the air, television serves as a loss leader to sell merchandise and PPVs, so others, based on the marketplace, aren't going to make money by getting syndication of wrestling here, and what's the point if there's no profit? Newsweek did a piece on the convention this past week with a mention of Hogan being there signing autographs, and the only other mention of wrestling in the story was of steroidal wrestlers wandering the showroom floor, which I guess shows still what pro wrestling is still associated with the movers and shakers. Starting on January 1, 1996, an institution called Council Superior Audiovisual in Europe is to oversee and regulate all non-European produced television shows, and this could have an effect on what is allowed on the air as far as wrestling programming is concerned. Greg Price's All-Star Wrestling has February 11th in Washington, North Carolina, Cactus Jack vs. Super Vader, and March 11th in Hazelhurst, Georgia, Jack vs. Abdullah the Butcher. Eddie Goldman, Evan Ginsberg and Fred Geobold do a monthly 2-hour wrestling show on WBAI-FM 99.5 in New York on the last Friday of every month. On February 24th, Bruno Sammartino and Bastion Booger will be guests. Steve Regal worked in England over Christmas for All-Star Promotions out of Bristol, losing to David Taylor via countout. The local wrestling in England is bigger than usual with David Finlay, after 2 years away, Tony St. Clair and Steve Casey who usually work for Otto Wands. Wands isn't doing anything major until June 20th but it booked pretty solid from that point until the annual of year-end show which will be 12/12 in Bremen, Germany. The American Avalanche, PN News aka Cannonball Grizzly, returns to England on February 16th as a heel while also in England for that group is Lion Satoshi, New Japan's Satoshi Kojima, billed as the Japanese Lean Machine. Felix Lopez, Barabas, the original teacher of Carlos Colon, reopened the AWF in Puerto Rico running opposition to WWC on January 28. The biggest names involved are El Vampiro, David Heath, with manager Luna Vachon, original Jason, One Staring, and Chicky Star. Former pro wrestling legend Danny Hodge, who held the old NWA World Junior Heavyweight title a record 7 times between 1960 and 1976, when the title was held in somewhat high regard internationally, something that ended largely upon his retirement, and despite common knowledge that the only pro wrestling champion to appear on a Sports Illustrated cover was Mr. Hogan, was also an SI cover boy and is generally considered as one of the greatest amateur wrestlers ever produced in this country. He not only went undefeated, but was never taken down in college, is going to be immortalized in the amateur wrestling scene. This year for the first time the NCAA is going to award the top wrestler of the year the Hodge Trophy which wrestling publicists instituted as their version of the Heisman Trophy. Hodge currently works with UWF as a witness for their world title matches. Cactus Jack is scheduled to work February 20th to February 23rd in Arkansas for Burt Prentice's Ozark Mountain Wrestling. That group starts on TV in Jonesboro, Arkansas on February 18th. They've got 17 shows scheduled for February which is an awful lot for a small group, running weekly shows in several Arkansas towns. Actually that's more shows than any group in the United States except WWF, which has 23 shows, will run this month. The independent show with Chavo Guerrero as booker that was scheduled to have Eddie Guerrero, Vampiro Candy Ants, Black Magic and others on February 5th in Anaheim was cancelled. UWF tapes air on Sunday nights on a cable access show in Washington, D.C. called Inside the Squared Circle although it's only on a trial basis and UWF hadn't agreed to continue doing it because it's in a block with SMW and they don't seem to want to be part of a block with an American pro wrestling group. The Battlecade group which had an ESPN2 deal but never even did one taping has already been put on indefinite hold. Jake Roberts appears February 11th for Atlantic Coast Wrestling in Burlington, Virginia. Dennis Coraluzzo has a February 11th TWA reunion show set for Philadelphia which has been postponed. Virginia promoter Doug Ward claims the problem with his show a couple of weeks back with himself versus Tully Blanchard where the town was postered and publicity was around but no building was booked was because he said the local sponsor neglected to make a deal with the local school which he wasn't aware of when they started publicizing the show locally. Mike Samples will be bringing Tracy Smothers and Ricky Morton back to Indianapolis on February 9th and February 16th. Carmen Desprito's Mid-American Wrestling in Milwaukee has an event news hotline at 414-777-3941 and a free monthly newsletter for area fans which you can get by calling the hotline number. Jim Crockett's February 4th Dallas show was up to 600 fans for a John Hawk vs. Tony Norris main event which was said to have been the best match at the Sportatorium in several of years, and that's with no local television. WCW started this past week on the Prime Cable Network with new voiceovers of 2-week-old WCW Pro shows with Eric Bischoff and Dusty Rhodes doing the announcing. From those who saw the first episode we were told Rhodes was totally unbearable. On the weekend TBS show, Randy Savage did an interview about leaving WWF saying that he wanted to return to the ring and saw that WCW was where the action was and that winning the WWF title a third time wouldn't mean much because the real competition, in particular Hulk Hogan, was in WCW. They strongly teased an eventual Hogan-Savage match with Savage saying how their friendship is always on the edge and how he's in WCW primarily to win the title. WCW Saturday Night with the Savage vs. Arnold Anderson match on January 28 drew a 2.8 rating, which is its highest in several months, while Pro did a 1.7 and main event was preempted for the Super Bowl. The Saturday rating was helped since the general rule has been that the Saturday after the Clash helps the ratings, plus not having a Sunday show usually adds about 0.3 to the rating because it makes it the only chance to see WCW in the afternoon over a weekend. TBS ratings traditionally are at their highest point January through March and usually start to decline as the weather gets warmer. Vader made a play last week to get his current contract, which has 2 years remaining, to be extended for another 3 years. Don't know details of that, but one could surmise the play was in exchange for putting Hogan over clean. A few notes on the Chris Cruz behavior on the all-nighter, which we wrote up heavily a few weeks back. It was Cruz's idea and not an idea someone came up for him, which I guess makes one question exactly how his brain was working the day. Also, there was a spot in the show which was digitized where Cruz was getting obnoxious and Dusty Rhodes whacked him. The reason it was digitized in post-production was because Cruz was draped Tim Hogan merchandise and they decided they didn't want to show a scene of Dusty beating up someone wearing Hogan merchandise. The Cruiserweight tournament is being worked on as Chris Benoit was contacted about being brought in for it, but it looks like Benoit is happy just working ECW in New Japan in 1995. On television this week, Bischoff knocked Jean-Paul Levesque, making a big deal about how Alex Wright beat him and about how a lot of people thought Levesque was going to be a big deal but said he was just another guy who couldn't cut the mustard like Max Payne. It's interesting, in the TV replays of the Vader powerbomb spot they don't air Hogan popping up, almost as if those producing the show know the idea was bad. However, Hogan brings up popping up in his interviews. I suspect that aside from the stuff already booked for the 2 PPVs and house shows that have already been advertised, that'll be it for Hogan-Vader singles matches. Rickson Gracie was in Las Vegas during the Clash but didn't attend the show and negotiated with Bischoff, who has an idea of doing his own UFC type of pay-per-view series of shows. Apparently Gracie wanted a huge guarantee, but the idea is being significantly considered. Hogan got a lot of heat for an interview he did in this week's Gong magazine. While most wrestling interviews in Japanese pubs are supposed to be serious, real interviews, usually, depending on how inbred working is to the wrestler involved, means anywhere from 40 to 95% shoot. Hogan of course set a new standard. Hogan was almost obsessive in bringing up Ultimate Warrior, saying Warrior is the only wrestler in the world with the skill and ability to beat him, which as you can imagine got over big in Japan. He said that he knew the WWF was going down and needed to make a change, and said that when people think of pro wrestling in America, they think of Hulk Hogan. He bragged about beating Stan Hansen, Antonio Inoki, Great Muta and everyone else put against him in Japan, and again talked about how Warrior was the only one that would be a challenge for him. He then made the cardinal mistake in Japan, claiming he had never been beaten in Japan. Japanese keep records and this was viewed as an outright license. He's done jobs in the past for Inoki and Hansen. He said the WWF belt means nothing anymore and said he'd like to win the IWGP belt and knows he could because he's already beaten Great Muta, of course, not realizing Muta lost the title a long time ago to Hashimoto. He said the only top wrestler still in the WWF is Bret Hart, but said he knew if he wrestled Hart he'd beat him because he said Hart has the skill but doesn't have the heart and soul. He said that now that he was back, that pro wrestling in America would flourish once again. The South Pacific tour scheduled for April was cancelled, so the next international tour will be May 24 to June 1 in Germany, called Hulkamania 95, with Hogan, Savage and Vader advertised. Paul White, billed as 7'2", 440, who came to a WCW show in Chicago, is apparently coming in under the name Paul Bunyan and is training in Atlanta. Hogan wants a new Andre to be a permanent heel for him both in wrestling and in whatever television vehicles he can muster up. A correction. While White has wrestled for Larry Sharp, he's not a protege of Sharp. Jim Neidhart's name has been bandied about as coming in since he's done with Titan and worked with Hogan on the TV series. WWF. Sid Vicious is expected to debut as Sid Justice in the role of Shawn Michaels' bodyguard at the next set of tapings on February 20 to February 22. Michaels announced on television that he was giving up his duties as co-host of Raw, rumored to be setting the stage for the return of Jesse Ventura as an out-of-court settlement for the $1 million Titan owes him over the decision in a lawsuit last year, and would be announcing his bodyguard on that show. The timing of Ventura headed in seems right, since if he came in any sooner, he'd be violating the WCW deal he made, which was paying him something like $5,000 per week, which expires right around March 1 just to stay home. Besides Undertaker being out of action with a knee injury, being replaced by Mabel in most cities, Pierre replaced him in Quebec City and Montreal. IRS, his opponent, is also missing dates with a shoulder injury. For whatever this means, tickets for the March 13 WWF Monday Night Raw taping in Stockton, California list 7 p.m. as the starting time. We had been told they were starting 5:30 p.m. on a Monday so they could live. We'll try and find out which version is correct. Television tapings after WrestleMania will be April 3rd and April 4th both in Lowell, Massachusetts and April 5th in Poughkeepsie. Gary Plummer of the 49ers was a guest on KFMB radio on February 2 with Hank Bauer saying that Vince McMahon offered him $30,000 to wear a WWF hat and say he was going to WrestleMania on camera but he turned it down, although didn't say why. Apparently Ken Norton Jr. accepted that deal. Linda Stassi's gossip column in the New York Daily News, which has been right a little less often than it has been wrong regarding pro wrestling, claimed Lawrence Taylor was given in excess of $100,000 for taking the bump at Royal Rumble and would be getting in excess of another $100,000 for working WrestleMania. Monday Night Raw on January 30th, 1-2-3 Kid and Bob Holly vs. Smoking Guns, did a 3.0 rating, its best in a while Action Zone did a strong 2.1 and Mania a 1.3. Besides Vicious and Ventura, expected to return at either the next two tapings are Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji, Nikolai Volkov and Pierre with his new gimmick. Diesel vs. Jeff Jarrett for the title headlines the February 20th Live Raw, which probably means they won't be using that match at house shows after that point. No Raw on February 13th because of the Westminster Kennel Show, which traditionally outdraws Raw. Diesel is participating in a celebrity slam dunk contest in conjunction with the NBA All-Star Game this week and also in an MTV softball game, and judging from a lengthy interview at Raw where they called him Kevin Nash and tried to put him over as a real person as opposed to a cartoon character, they look to be committed to building the company around him. It was the same type of interview McMahon did with Hulk Hogan before the match with Sid Justice and again when he came back 10 months later after the steroid controversy. Even the normally conservative Japanese mags are calling him a box office failure. Besides Pam Anderson and Ken Norton Jr., expected at WrestleMania as celebs are one of the kids from Home Improvement and the guy who plays Martinez on NYPD Blue. On the local showings of Raw in this market they had ads all over the place for the Hogan-Vader match at Super Brawl. You can see the Jim Ross influence when Man Mountain Rock debuted and the announcers were bringing up his collegiate wrestling background. WWF's next Germany tour will be April 17 to April 22. Bob Holly will be racing the full 19-event NASCAR Slim Jim Series in a fast car bought for him by Vince McMahon from March 18 to November 19, including an event that will be televised on TNT the day before WrestleMania. A clarification on WWF's claim of their PPVs going live to 148 nations. While Armed Service Programming does air WWF pay-per-view shows, they air them on about a 6-month tape delay. The only WWF event ever broadcast live on Armed Service was the 1993 Survivor Series. The last pay-per-view did air live in one country in Europe on free cable television, I believe Germany, and on pay-per-view in the United States and Canada, which does seem to be something less than 148 nations. Former WWF announcer Sean Mooney is the permanent co-anchor on WER Television in New York. Dick Murdoch appeared at the January 26 Baltimore show as a heel, coming out for an interview with Bob Backlund doing a dual lecture on morality. Murdoch then seconded Backlund for a match with Razor Ramon, which saw Murdoch's interference backfire. It must have been a slow news week in Worcester, Massachusetts 2 weeks back. The local paper ran front-page stories on both January 25 and January 26 relating first to the WWF turning down a request by Make-A-Wish to have Bret Hart visit terminal 11-year-old Bobby Means at his home when WWF came to Worcester, a show that as it turned out was scheduled for February 6 but was rescheduled for February 9. WWF would have allowed him backstage to meet with Hart, but his physical condition, according to the story, made him too weak to make the trip to the building. WWF has a policy against those type of meetings. Naturally, the story made the WWF look bad, so the next day WWF responded and there was yet another front-page story. While they wouldn't authorize Hart to visit Means in his home, if he wasn't able to attend the show, they'd have one of their wrestlers give him a phone call. The second story had comments from incensed readers of the original article but had those who have done business with Titan defending them, saying they always did more than asked by charities. Although Vince McMahon said on Raw that few tickets are left for WrestleMania, a phone call to the Hartford Civic Center revealed the best tickets left are fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left are fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left are fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left are fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets left our fourth row ringside. Revealed the best tickets